Chris Graham joins me this week to discuss flash brewing. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 309. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 309, and it's late August 2024. Chris Graham joins me to discuss flash brewing. Thank you to this week's sponsors, Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. They've recently launched an all-new experience called Craft Spirits and Distilling. If you make or love spirits, check out spiritsanddistilling.com for recipes, how-to videos, their Spirits and Distilling podcast, and much more. Again, that new site is spiritsanddistilling.com. And BeerSmith Web, the online version of BeerSmith brewing software. BeerSmith for the web lets you design great beer recipes from any browser, including your tablet or phone. Edit recipes on the go with access to the same full suite of recipe building tools as our desktop version. Try BeerSmith Web today by creating a free account at beersmithrecipes.com. And finally, a reminder to click that like and subscribe button on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or whatever platform you're listening on. Clicking those buttons is a great way to support the show. And now let's jump into this week's episode. Today on the show, I welcome back Chris Graham. Chris is the president of More Beer and has been brewing for over 25 years. Chris has taught at the Seibel Institute and is a former board member on the Brewers Association Board of Directors and the American Homebrewers Association Governing Council. Chris, it's great to have you back on the show. How are you doing today?
Doing great, Brad. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. I haven't seen you in a while.
It's been a hard year not doing as many events as we usually do.
Well, HomebrewCon kind of went by the wayside this year, so it's been difficult, I think.
In a fledgling industry, it's hard when you lose kind of your key thing.
Yeah, I'm hoping something happens with it next year, hopefully. But I was wondering what's going on at More Beer. I know you guys have some new things going on all the time out there.
Yeah, no, we're always putting new products out, trying to innovate new things. But hopefully today we talk about kind of our new thing that we're excited about, which is flash brewing.
Yeah, I'm excited about it too. I really wasn't familiar with it until you emailed me and said you guys were starting to do this. So what is flash? From what I understand, it's like a no mash, no boil method for making beer. But really, what is flash brewing as a method?
The whole concept of this is trying to, give someone the best success on their first chance at homebrewing. And Olin has been working on this for several years because he's probably our key person always talking to different vendors. What's available? What's out there? What's new? What are you guys working on? What are pros using that you guys sell that we aren't? And over time, he, kept connecting these things and started talking to me about it. Like, hey, what do you think if we can make this concept of something where you don't need to mash, you don't need to boil? Let's start talking about why people might make bad beer and what can we eliminate in that process. And really, in the last 2 years, some of the biggest dominoes have fallen to where it's like, ooh, I think we can overcome this and we can overcome that. So the concept is flash. You brew in a flash. And it's really about taking your brew day and getting it to ludicrously fast. We're talking, at first we were saying 15 minutes. Then we decided, hey, Vito, make a video on this. And even with mistakes, meaning he had a problem with his little fermentor where the gasket wouldn't seal at first, he had to kind of build the gasket on there. The whole thing took 8 minutes.
Wow.
And as we all know as homebrewers, okay, the brew day took 8 minutes. It's still, everything is similar after that. And we are trying to do certain things to help people make less mistakes. But, let me just kind of go over like the core basic and who is this for? And that's really like kind of the key thing that I think people are misunderstanding as we release it, because we are kind of known as releasing stuff to all grain brewers. That's what we love. We're toys. We tinker, we have fun. But the idea of this is, if I can get somebody as a brand new brewer, which this industry needs like crazy right now, to make a good batch of beer on their first try without bunches of things that they can do wrong. That's our goal. I mean, how many of us have talked to someone who said, "Oh, I brewed beer once, it was terrible," or "I had a friend's brewer who brewed once and it was okay," or it really wasn't that good." And we're watching the TikTok world and the Instagram world and everything like that. And how do we make something that caters to that? And we know it's not about building mash tuns and, you know, 4 hour or 5 hour brew days. It's what can we do quick and make good beer. Um, and so that's kind of the initial target audience. Where we've really found the most success so far, because it's hard to find those people, right? Without spending a bunch of money to try to get them. Where we found the best success so far is a bunch of people who are saying, like, I don't have time to brew. I stopped brewing. I had kids. I got a divorce. I moved to a smaller place, or even I just moved and I didn't want to have a 3-vessel system in my garage or whatnot. And the reality is, I just, for whatever reason, fell out of love with this hobby for a bit, but I still really kind of want to get back into it. And, that's actually the people, and we have lists of those who we've marketed to in the past, and we've noticed they've fallen out of it. And we've actually had our best success getting them to try brewing again and getting great testimonials of, insanely easy to do, made good, drinkable beer. And so it's kind of funny that you have two very different target audiences, and I still hope we can penetrate that brand new brewer, which I think we are getting some. You just have to do a whole lot to get that brand new brewer versus getting that craft beer lover who wants to be able to make their own beer again.
So I'm thinking like, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, there was like these Mr. Beer kits sold all over the place. You probably remember them.
Absolutely.
In a lot of the retail places. And I haven't seen as many, recently, but are you trying to target, kind of that kind of market where people that are just getting started with beer?
That's gonna be a goal. So right now, or it is a goal, but it's going to be down the line. Right now, what we decided to do was release it in 5 gallon sizes, which is way too big for that market.
Yeah.
But our goal was, let's beat it up a little bit. Let's improve our instructions. Let's get everything right with the audience we already understand. Let's work with them. And we've been doing a ton of that. And even within ourselves, I mean, Olin and I have brewed a whole bunch of these, trying to perfect the process, trying to minimize the places that things can go wrong, and write the instructions out to do it that way that you as an experienced homebrewer might be like, well, I know a better way to do this, but you also know better sanitization techniques, and you also understand certain parts of this that a brand new brewer may not. And so the instructions, when you look at them, are very simplistic, but they're all designed specifically to not have that potential infection, not have that extra oxidation, not have those things that we all taste and go, oh yeah, that's bad homebrew right there. And so those kits were cool, and we are hoping to do 1 gallon, maybe even half gallon, and 2.5 gallon. When we have the 1 gallon, I think that'll be right for that market. Maybe even as big as some of the big box shops or Ace Hardwares or whatnot. But I think we have a lot of work to do to really make them fit in that market and make it easy for the people selling them as well, because they can't be answering these questions either. Yeah. So it has to be kind of a no-brainer at that point. So we started with a handful of recipe kits, and our goal is to grow that up, especially as the different hop manufacturers are really, they're tweaking their stuff every day and coming out with new products. And at first you're like, yeah, whatever. And then you're like, wait, I can now do this because you guys made that. And so we're hoping to keep perfecting that. The other key ingredient, obviously, we all know is yeast. And we have our first flash brewing yeast, and it's not something we're trying to make new yeast styles. It's more of selection and really honing down, working with about 3 different labs, trying to isolate exactly what we want. And this first yeast we have is just an awesome IPA pale ale type of one, but it's super safe in that it drops pH fast.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of one of those key things to get us in a safe zone. And then it's very temperature tolerant. So we don't have to focus on the brand new brewer having to have that ideal temperature zone. I've done tests in the 60s, I've done tests in the 90s, and they produce a very similar kit every single time. And that's kind of what we keep trying to nail down, is that it's almost the same thing at any temperature range. And then we have some more that we hope to bring on in the next year or so for more specialty, a lager strain that is also temperature tolerant, but makes, just crystal clear, a little bit drier type finished product. So it's been fun. It's been fun working with some manufacturers who we haven't gotten to work with in the past, who are excited about this too. And
one of the things I like is you're selling the kits separate from the the ingredient kits separate from all the equipment. So most of us have, or a lot of the existing brewers, we have a carboy or a bucket or something, some kind of fermenter we can use already. So we got most of the equipment we need. But it is nice to be able to just buy a simple kit and, like you said, make a batch of beer in a really short amount of time.
Yeah, and then, so if you already, we kind of handle things two different ways: the experienced brewer of any sort of experience and has equipment versus the brand new brewer. And some of the things that, as a experienced brewer, you'd be like, what in the heck are you guys doing? Like, one, we don't have you stir, which most of us homebrewers drives us nuts looking at this going, wait, I'm not stirring this? But the fermentation itself does the stirring for you, and blending in water does some of the stirring for you.
Yeah.
But we also know and have watched a lot of people do some stirring with some questionable stirrers and in questionable environments, pulling in bacteria. Another thing, as a brand new brewer, what we have a lot of people doing is bottling using carbonation drops right into a flip top bottle right off of the fermenter instead of trying to rack. And good experienced brewers know how to rack gently, know how to do it without much oxygen pickup. But new people tend to pick up a ton of oxygen at that phase.
Yeah.
And you're not protected. So you're just oxidizing the heck out of it.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into the kits a little bit. One of the first things I noticed up front is you have quite a few differences from a typical no boil kit that I've seen in the past. So what are some of the things that make these kits unique, starting from perhaps the beginning of the process?
Yeah, so we're working with the different manufacturers. So the malt we are working with manufacturers who pre-boil it before drying it. And that's huge. Like, you have to have that. You have to go through that boil. We've tried it without that. We can get malt extract way cheaper, but without that boil, I'm convinced you can hardly make a good kit. So then we are doing some enhancements to that, nutrients and other things, to make that malt have a fast start time. And as we all know, fast is important. The hops we're using for bitterness are in a liquid form, and they are great because they are set up in a way to not light struck. So you don't have to worry about, if my fermenter's out on the counter and there's UV light, having this huge, terrible taste, just like the old skunking of Heineken and whatnot in the light green bottles.
So some of your malt's kind of pre-boiled, right? Essentially. Yep. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
Yeah, and so is the hops, right? I mean, it's isomerized hop extract, I assume, right?
The process for you, so it's ready to go. That's why, you're doing that. It probably takes you longer to gather your ingredients than it does to actually, quote, make the beer.
Okay, so anyway, so you're using isomerized hop extract, I guess, to get the hop addition. What other thing? I mean, if I started making one of these kits, if I just open up the box, what would I actually have to do, and how long would it take me?
So we have a video on it. If you want to watch one of an actual just time lapse with the stopwatch in the corner, and it's 8 minutes, and it's really just water. And we're big fans of if someone has an RO water, and if someone's brand new to this, we're kind of encouraging people to just buy either reverse osmosis or distilled water as opposed to going through the headaches of knowing if their water is drinkable and if they're going to modify it. Of course, you can use tap water, but if you want your best results, we're just having people either use reverse osmosis or buying water. And then the malt you have is going to put you in the right pH when you stir that in. So essentially, you're going to put in a little bit of water. You're going to pre-sanitize your carboy or your fermenter.
Yeah.
Put in some water, a base of water, then throw in all your malts. Hit your hop.
That's correct.
Your bitterness hops. We have you throw in your dry hops right then, usually cryo. And then we have you put your yeast in and top up with water, and that is it. You are done.
And then I assume it probably kicks off fermentation, as you said, pretty quickly. And then how many days do you have to ferment it, roughly?
Usually depends on the temperature and things like that, but I typically say 1 week is your minimum. And then you can go into bottling. You can go 2 weeks if you want. We try to get new brewers to avoid big temperature swings the longer it's going to go, because that's another time you can pull oxygen in. If it cools way down over at night and warms up in the day, you're kind of sucking in air. So once fermentation is done, I'd rather get it bottled faster. But this yeast is known to be aggressive, and so usually 1 week is plenty. And then we have them bottling. Like I said earlier, we're having them do that simply by just putting a couple of these, basically sugar tablets in the bottom of the bottle, fill right off of the fermenter, and we're doing them with simple Grolsch-style tops where you just seal them up and you let them sit for another week or two till they're carbonated, and you're done.
Nice. Well, what kind of equipment do you need other than obviously the ingredient kit?
Yeah, as you just heard, though, there's not much.
Doesn't sound like it.
An airlock, bottles. The fermenter hopefully has a spigot at the bottom that's off the bottom, so you're leaving behind. You're not producing a ton of trub, there is some, so you clearly want to leave that behind. But it's not like a traditional batch where you have a whole bunch left over, inches at the bottom of your carboy.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have the hop matter for one thing.
You do have
nor
some.
do you have most of the grain matter, right? Like you would from an all grain.
Exactly. We're having you use cryo a lot, so you're using very little amount of hops relative to a traditional dry hopping.
It's concentrated. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
Interesting. Sounds pretty good so far. So let's say I start making it one afternoon. It takes about 2 weeks maybe to get some good beer?
Yeah, I tell people typically 3 to drinking it, right? And then 4 or 5 is really when you're probably going to hit that sweet spot of the best flavor.
So what's the feedback been like on this? Have you had good luck with people trying it out? You said a lot of experienced brewers have tried it too. Yeah.
So the feedback's been overwhelmingly good. There has been some bad feedback, and there's been a very interesting one, which is I like to call the proof is in the pudding. So I entered 3 beers into this year's National Homebrewing Competition.
Okay.
And one of them I named Flash Gordon after our friend Gordon.
Yeah.
And it was a pale ale, and I did it in the Flash style. And it got a 34. So,
wow, that's pretty good.
My goal was a 29. I was like, a 29 to me is a drinkable beer, right?
Yeah,
it may not be the best thing in the world, but it's definitely drinkable. The 34 was beyond my wildest dreams.
That's pretty high, I would say. That's amazing.
Yeah. And well, what really ticked me off was my Dortmunder got a 22. And it turned out to have some issues after I bottled it.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
And that was all grain lagered in my conical at the proper
You actually took your time with that one, huh?
And I spent, how many hours working on that one? And it's like, wait a second.
Always a risk when you move them into the bottles, huh?
Yeah. But this is brewing like any other brewing where you're not always going to hit a home run every single time. I'm, at 34, I am an experienced brewer. I do have certain controls. So this one wasn't done in a plastic carboy. It was done in a stainless conical.
Yeah.
It was done under pressure, not much pressure, but like 3 psi with the spunding valve. But it wasn't done with temp control. So, it's kind of a blend of things. I knew I brewed enough of them knowing I didn't need the temp control. I love pressure fermenting, but I do it more for safety than anything else, because that way, if my garage swings, I know I'm using a spunding valve. If the temperature plummets or raises really fast, the spunding valve keeps me at that same pressure, and I'm not pulling
oxygen in.
Yeah. And so I've just become a huge fan of that for any brewing lately. But what I like about this as a thing that experienced brewers can do is you can bring your experience to it. You don't have to follow our instructions. Now, I will say we've gotten some bad feedback, and one of them right off the get-go was, somebody didn't want to use bottled water per our instructions, so he did what he always does, which is he threw Camden tablets in his water to get rid of the chloramines. But what he didn't remember was he wasn't going to boil it afterwards. So everything just stayed there in the ferment, and it did not make good beer. Had very metallic flavor.
Because I assume the Camden tablets probably killed off the yeast, right?
No, it fermented. It worked. But it just had some metallic flavors he just did not like. And we're imagining that's because you did not drive them off with the boil.
Huh. Could be. I don't know. Hard to say. Because, it's used widely in wine and even mead. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And, usually those, you let it sit for a while. You don't just go right away.
There's no doubt.
So potentially if he had done it and let it sit overnight, that might have been one thing. But he just did it and then just threw everything in.
Yeah.
So you're right. It probably did mess with the yeast in addition.
That's what I'm thinking, maybe a little bit, yeah.
We've had another one by a very experienced brewer, because I know his beer, and he had made 2 of these quite good, and then his third one came out terrible. And he said he went away, and it sat in the house, and later he looked at the weather, and it had gone hot, cold, like
temperature cycling is not good for beer.
And it was oxidized. And that's really, as soon as we all tasted it, we're like, this is, it even had that little purplish tint to it.
Oh, nice.
And it was clearly oxidized. And so this isn't bomb-proof. This isn't foolproof. It's just, we tried to find all the areas that people typically have issues with, especially when they're first starting.
Sure. And
tried to reduce those as much as we could.
Yeah. Well, I know you have the kits on the website for 5 gallons, right? I think, right? What styles are available for this particular method right now?
A lot of pale ales, IPAs. That's our most popular.
So how many are there roughly? I'm sorry.
I think about 13 or 15. I should have looked.
Oh, wow.
We got on the air.
So quite a few.
Some are clone kits. Some clones lend themselves perfectly to this. Some. So we just kind of started with those. And had fun with our kind of more better sellers that we knew would work well. And like I said, our plan is to just keep, pushing another one in, one after the other. We just started working with, to be honest, different influencers who we've worked with in the past. And, they're starting to have their first batches. And they're like, whoa, I thought this was going to be crap. And it's not crap. And I'm like, yeah, of course it's not. I wouldn't do that. But I understand it. When you first hear about it or see it, you think, like, how could this make a drinkable beer? And we're not trying to replace all grain. We're not trying to replace even extract. I think my goal is to get more new people in the hobby this way, with the hope that they like it, to where they want to try more. They want to gain control. They want to have more fun and be more of a hobby. And that's kind of the hope that we do with this.
Cool. Do you have any exotic styles available? I don't know. You have some darker beers? I haven't checked.
Those are coming. Getting the pre-boiled for the darker requires a little more cash investment that we are working on, but has to be that fully boil type thing before we dry it out. So it's coming.
Makes sense. That's interesting. Yeah. So Talk to them about that process? How do you actually make the malt in this particular case? I mean,
And we're working with different manufacturers. We buy a whole lot of malt, right? And from both here in the United States, Canada.
so I assume they're doing a longer boil than they might normally do, and then go through the process to actually condense it, or what?
That's our specs on it. Yes.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so
Interesting.
they're always pushing back a little bit, but you don't need an hour-long boil, but you need some. You need to hold it up there. You want to go through that hot break. It's kind of the key start to it. So most of that's been separated before you, as the brewery, even gets it.
Right. That makes sense. Interesting. Well, we talked a little bit about the final product, but how does it compare? Have you done some blind taste tests or anything like that with it? I mean,
No,
I obviously did really well at the homebrew conference, but competition.
That was my first like blind taste, right? Like, I've done a lot of, hey, I'm going camping in a few weeks. Why don't I whip up a batch, see how this does with my friends? 4th of July is coming. Why don't we whip up a batch, have it on the 4th of July? So we did a Citra session for the 4th of July, very light beer, but nice Citra flavor to it. And that keg was gone before the parade started. So that I knew did well.
That's pretty good. That's awesome.
And would it, this isn't going to be one that's like, hey, taste my double decoction versus my flash. That's not what we're going for. We're not ever thinking we're going to be able to make a Maillard reaction or anything like that. We can't really change the mouthfeel much. You can, play around a little bit to try to change mouthfeel, but you're not going to be able to emulate mash temperature changes. You're not going to be able to emulate some of these things. But again, that's not its intended purpose. It's kind of fun as a home brewer playing and saying, well, what can I do with it?
Sure.
And here's where it really shines. You're brewing. You're going to do an all grain batch. What, minimum 5 to 6 hours you're going to invest in this day?
Oh, yeah.
No big deal to clean one more fermenter and collect a little more water out of my RO system. And I just make that second batch, adding 0 extra time because I already have my sanitizers out. I already have my equipment out. All I'm doing is just, hey, let's just make a simple beer while this thing's fermenting. I'll just have this other beer going because now when I clean one keg, no big deal to clean a second while I'm cleaning that first, especially all the sanitization stuff, transfers. I just found it very handy for that. So when we do some of our videos for work, a lot of times that last little bit, we'll just whip up another batch, and it allows us different editing shots, and it allows us just more beer to come out the other end.
Sure. So, Chris, we were talking a little bit before the show, and you said that the new flash brewing kind of evolved from, I think it was an Australian method called, let's see here, fresh wort or something like that.
That's exactly it. Fresh wort kits have been popular in Australia, at least as far as we know, that's where it started.
Sure.
And actually, some of our good friends out of Norway are doing it now, too. And what they're doing is brewing a batch at a larger scale. Then they keep boiling and boiling, basically reducing it, let's say maybe 20%. So a 5-gallon batch, they're reducing down into 4. They're packing them at a boiling temperature, meaning they're pouring them into head packs, these plastic vessels that can handle that heat. And then they're literally just sealing them off, putting them in the showroom, writing down what the kit was, like what the batch had in it, hops-wise and malt-wise. And then customers are coming in, probably buying their next homebrew batch, but like, hey, I'm just going to make an extra batch of beer while I'm doing it, buy one of these already pre-made ones.
So this is almost like a no-chill. People, you do the no-chill and they put it in a plastic cube and let it sit overnight kind of thing. Is that the kind of the idea, I guess?
That's the idea, but they're letting it sit for months sometimes.
Wow.
And, they're doing that and they're having success. People are coming back, getting another one. So we started eyeing it going like, hey, maybe this is something we can do here in the States and we could have some fun with it. We sell pro equipment. We can easily set up, a 15-barrel brew house just dedicated to this, and it'd be pretty fun. But, unlike are the people we watched doing it, their sales were coming out of their showroom. People were picking them up and taking them. We were looking at like, oh, shipping, that's going to be a bear because this is mostly water. So it's going to, one, cost a lot to ship, and two, be at risk of damage. When you're shipping a cube of water that's just threaded on, I have a feeling you're going to end up with a lot of broken ones out there that are leaking. You can only imagine what UPS and FedEx are thinking as this trail of sugar waters coming out of their truck. So,
yeah, and you get this 50-pound cube or something they're hauling around too. Nothing bad could possibly happen there, right?
Exactly. And so we were looking at this as a good model. They were saying their customers love it, and coming back and repeating, and we really love that concept. But we're like, how do we do something similar but even better? And the thing that really concerned us about that was, how would we know how old these got? And what are the risks as they age? And so we kind of said, like, after talking to some food science people and whatnot, we all kind of agreed that this may not be the best idea in the United States to try to do. We're a little more litigious than most countries. And
well, especially on the scale you're doing, where you're shipping it all over the country potentially.
And you can't guarantee how long someone then takes it and puts it in their garage or their basement or whatnot with the dog looking at it. And, who knows?
But it was interesting. I think you mentioned they're still using like a hop extract after the fact on this or something like that.
Oh, on the fresh wort kits?
Yeah.
They added all the hops they did the
mash, they had them up front.
They added all in there. And my concern was, after the boil, what are those flavors doing over time? Are you really keeping a hop stand hop for months on end? Probably not, but most of these people are probably making it fairly fast, in which case I bet they're coming out pretty good. But if someone lets it sit 3 months, what's that going to taste like fermented? So long story short, that's kind of the origins of what we saw. And then we looked at, like, could we deconstruct that? Could we? Sure. And at the time, we really couldn't. There wasn't quite the right ingredients available to us that we thought we could make good products. We could do it, but when we tried a little bit here or there, and we're like, this has got a ways to go. But then it's been within the last 2 years that, working with the different hop manufacturers, we go, whoa, this is here. This is getting here. And then that's when we started doing a series of experiments. And at any given time in our conference room, COVID, no conferences in the conference room, Olin would be in there with 21-gallon fermenters trying all these different experiments until he finally, and I will credit him, he's the one who found the right combos and continues to. So it's pretty fun to watch, like, when he finally got it. And then we thought we had it. We all started making it, and we didn't. And what it turned out, we started working with the manufacturer, and they had switched something. They didn't switch the SKU number, but they had switched what they were sending us, thinking it would be better, but it turned out to be absolutely worse.
Yeah.
So trial and error. But I think we've worked out most of the errors, and that's where we are now.
Well, I mean, it is great now. We've got all these hop products available, and apparently you're working with the maltsters to get specialized malt product as well. And it gives you a lot more flexibility we didn't have a few years ago.
You and I watched this hobby over how many years? Getting on 30 now. It's kind of scary. And what we have access to now versus 30 years ago is night and day.
Yeah, it is fantastic, though. It's nice, though. Hopefully it brings some more people into the hobby. And
that's what we hope.
Yeah. Did you have any closing thoughts on the new kits?
Keep an open mind. That's what I tell everybody. This is not trying to replace things. This is trying to supplement things. And this is just like anything else. We kind of consider it a platform. Right now, we're trying to keep it closed. We're not trying to sell all the ingredients separate as each individual component, because they don't work well outside of their components. So we're not trying to create a whole new brewing style. We're just trying to kind of make this little platform that you can have fun. Now, you as a home brewer can add more hops. You can change the timing of when you add your hops. We have you add all your hops on day one. But sometimes I'll do it where I'll reserve what I know are my flavor and aroma hops, and I'll add them post-fermentation. And I like that, because that's what I've been doing for years.
Sure.
So it's something you can do to make it individual to you.
Cool. Well, great. Well, I know you want to talk about the flash brewing, which I think we covered pretty well, but you had a couple other things. I think one of them was the X3 conical.
Yeah, the X3 conical is fun. It's quickly become my favorite conical, and the X1 and the X2 were good. Don't get me wrong, but the X3 was just kind of the like piece de la resistance.
What's so cool about it?
It has the jacketed, like built-in welded-on jacket, which for me, the X2 had that too. That's just so clean. It's so effective at cooling. It's ridiculous. And it had that, but the X2 had a I call them a pool filter clamp. I don't know what the right term is, but the clamp that goes all the way around, and that works 99.9989% of the time. It's bulletproof.
Sure.
But that 0.002 when it doesn't is such a pain, and it's a little more finicky to get on and such. Where just having the X3 replace that with I think it's 8 or 10 inch, maybe even bigger TC clamp. So it's dead simple. I put on thousands of TC clamps, and you can't. Yeah, I shouldn't say you can't do it wrong. Someone will prove me wrong on that. But it's much easier to get a proper seat to where you'll hold pressure. Yeah. They put on more fittings than I probably would have liked in terms of TC clamps and things like that. But I'm starting to see, I went to Germany last fall, craft brewers conference. I'm starting to see these little fittings being made that you could put on any conical. And I'm like, ooh, wait a second. I can get a stirring rod. I can get a digital pressure sensor, a digital spunding valve that should be somewhat affordable when it drops from manufacturers. I'm like, ooh, I'm glad I have all these TC that I'm not currently using, but I think I can use in the future.
And this is a brew build product. What sizes does it come in?
It comes in, I use the 7, it comes in a 14, I believe it's 21 gallon, and a 50 something gallon.
Right. So that'd be full barrel, I guess, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm really just using the 5 gallon, format because that's what I love to play with.
Sure.
And I put mine on wheels, and they splayed the legs out too, as opposed to having perfectly straight up and down. And I didn't think I'd like that at first. I thought, But on the X2 and the X1, it was very tight under there when you're trying to work with the butterfly valve and you're
trying to drain it. Yeah.
You had to have everything positioned just right. On this one, get that little bit more room and the whole thing. I put mine on wheels, and it's super stable, even though the weight's up high. So I've just been ecstatic about it.
Awesome. And then one final product you want to mention, I think, was a hop. It was a new hop extract, I guess, right?
Yeah, they're called abstracts, and they come from a different industry. We got to sit through their presentation of how this technology became invented, and I'm not going to even try to explain how they do the extraction process, blah, blah, blah. I will dumb it down to the simplest form I know, and that is these cannabis companies sell a lot of vape products, so we'll just start there, and hopefully this will make sense in a minute. But it's not federally legal, but it's legal in several states. So these companies want to make the same flavor and aroma in every state, but yet they can't ship state to state. So they can't have one processing area and then ship state to state. The way I understand it, I didn't look into it. I just took their word on it. So what they did was say, okay, how do we deconstruct their cannabis basically so that they can create it using other things? And they were using hops to make cannabis flavors themselves, and they were using oranges and different things like the zest and such to really break it all the way down. Think of mass spectrometry to be able to then create this flavor and aroma that that they would in that state be able to combine this and this to make the THC side and this known flavor and aroma that doesn't have that, so that every state that same product could smell, taste, perform all the same. So that's what this was originally developed for.
Okay.
Then one of the guys, I forget, from one of the big hopsters, learned about it and was like, "Hey, we got to get in on this. This is going to be perfect." And everyone in the hop world said, "No, that's crazy. We don't want to be part of that." So he left the big hop company and went to them and said, like, "Listen, these brewers are constantly wanting to add back. They don't want it to be volatile. They want it to be very shelf stable. They want to be able to do it at a very low cost." And this fit the bill for all of them. So now these products are being used in big breweries. I'm not talking.
So as I understand this is actually a hop extract, but it's not made using the traditional methods like CO2 extraction, for example.
Not at all. Not at all. They're basically deconstructing.
And I probably should make the important point that it doesn't contain any cannabis either. This is literally just a hop extract, right?
It does not. And here's what's even funnier is we sell stuff from them that does not contain THC, CBD, anything like that, but it smells just like what you might be used to. And brewers are using that a lot now to get that smell in there without actually adding any THC. And some of the bigger breweries, I say bigger, I'm not talking biggest, but they're having fun with it on that front. But then they sent us these ones to first try to just play with, smell, that kind of stuff. Take a little toothpick and drop it in a pint of beer. And we're like, that's rad. How is this made? And they're like, oh, that was made from all food products, like orange peel and this. And we're like, what? It smelled just like Simcoe or just like Amarillo or whatnot. And then,
so is this is this more of a hop oil extract, I guess, where you can actually add it at finishing? Because I've also done the thing where you put a couple drops in and it's like, wow, it just totally changes the character of the beer. I think we call them hop oil extracts.
I personally have only used maybe 3 bottles of this so far, and I've always done it in the keg. And it's been like, hey, the 4th of July beer. This beer is really good, but it was a little bit young and could just use a little more hop kick to it. So I used just a quarter of a bottle, poured it into the keg, had my wife taste it. So
this would be the equivalent of isomerized extract then. It's something you can just add to taste at the end, right?
Exactly. No boil, none of that. This is, but it's made completely different than those products you're used to are made.
Sure. So it's a different thing, totally different process, I guess.
And they have different lines. They have ones that are, natural flavors, as we call things now, and those are made from almost anything. They're cheaper, but they also have ones that are purely just made from hops. So,
and are they tied to particular types of hops or not?
They emulate types of hops, but they're not always made from those hops.
Oh, okay.
They might be made from, if you can turn a less expensive hop into a more prized hop, that's a great thing. Huh. So I don't work in their labs. I don't even know where their labs are, but they now have different levels of this.
Well, I mean, it's not a big surprise. People have been, they've been extracting individual hop oils for some time. I assume if you combine those the right way, you can probably get very close to, particularly the aromatics for a particular variety.
But everything I've had in the past has never been just as good. And I feel like these are the first ones I've had that are just as good.
And they're called abstracts, right? And I guess they're available on your website, right?
Yep, they're available on our website, and Pro Brewers, you can get them directly from them, and we sell it on our More Beer Pro as well. And like I said, some of the bigger regional breweries have been using it with great success, and I believe those stories are on Abstracts' website. I won't put out names out there, but it's just a fun new thing, and it's kind of like one of those ones to your brewers. Consider choosing a flavor you like, just buying one. They're not that expensive, and trying just a little bit in a keg, or even just using a toothpick and just putting a drop into 1 pint just to see how much it changes that beer.
Yeah, I've like I said, I've used hop oils like that in the past. It's quite an experience to do. It's really cool. I mean, really nice that and of course, I love the idea that you can add it to taste.
Yeah, and then we had a little bit of fun in April. We did a little promo around the quote 420 beers, but they have no THC, but they have all the smell of dank and skunk and things that 10 years ago would have been a flaw in beer, and now people are looking for. Kind of like haze.
Well, Chris, wanted to ask you got any closing thoughts on either your new flash brewing kits or any of the other products we talked about?
No, nothing, big closing thing. I will say this to your legions of viewers, and thank you for having me on, Brad.
My pleasure, always.
And to those people, if you know someone who's interested in getting brewing, but you're like, trying to overcome some of these obstacles, have them consider these flash brewing kits just once, brew it with them. See what you think. And if you know someone who
loan them a carboy.
Yeah, exactly. If you know someone who used to brew, used to love it, and got out of it for whatever reason, there's no bad reason to get out of brewing, but man, there's great reasons to get back in. This is a really good gateway of just getting back into it without the commitment of storage space, without the commitment of a ton of time. And it's just, we all love sharing that final product, and that's what this allows you to do.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you again for coming on the show. Always a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Brad. I appreciate it.
And today my guest was Chris Graham. He's the president of More Beer and a brewer for now close to 30 years. Isn't that right, Chris?
I think we've hit that mark. It's crazy.
Congratulations. Thanks again, Chris.
Thank you, Brad.
I'd like to give a big thank you to Chris Graham for joining me this week. Thanks also to Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. They've recently launched an all-new experience called Craft Spirits and Distilling. If you make or love spirits, check out spiritsanddistilling.com for recipes, how-to videos, their Spirits and Distilling podcast, and much more. Again, that new site is spiritsanddistilling.com. And BeerSmith Web, the online version of BeerSmith brewing software. BeerSmith for the web lets you design great beer recipes from any browser, including your tablet or your phone. Edit recipes on the go with access to the same full suite of recipe building tools as our desktop version. Try BeerSmith Web today by creating a free account at beersmithrecipes.com. And finally, a reminder to click that like and subscribe button on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or whatever platform you're listening on. Clicking those buttons is a great way to support the show. I'd like to thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great brewing week.